I want a different judge. Now. I'll have my attorneys file a recusal motion within the hour, or I'll call the governor myself." The words hit the Providence Municipal Court like a thunderclap. Harrison Merriweather stood in the gallery, 6 feet of tailored confidence and boardroom authority, his voice carrying the weight of a man who'd spent decades getting exactly what he wanted. The courtroom went silent. Attorney Winston Caldwell III shifted in his seat, expensive briefcase suddenly feeling like an anchor. This wasn't the plan. This wasn't even close to the plan. Judge Frank Caprio looked up from the file in front of him, his expression unchanging. Behind Harrison, his son Colton stood frozen, hands trembling at his sides. But he wasn't watching the confrontation unfolding between his father and the judge. His eyes were fixed on someone in the gallery, a man in a worn jacket who had just walked in and taken a seat in the back row. Colton's face had gone pale, not embarrassed pale, terrified pale. He knew that man, and that man's presence changed everything. "Tell us where you're watching from." Judge Caprio set the file down carefully and folded his hands on the bench. His voice was calm, measured, the voice of a man who'd heard every threat and every demand a courtroom could offer. "Mr. Merriweather, you're not a party to this case. Your son is the defendant. Please take a seat." Harrison's jaw tightened. He gestured broadly, as if the entire courtroom existed to accommodate his will. "My son's case, my money, my attorneys, that makes me a party. That makes you a spectator with a checkbook. Sit down." The words landed with surgical precision. A few people in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. Winston Caldwell looked like he wanted to disappear into his leather portfolio. But Harrison Merriweather wasn't used to being told no. But Caprio wasn't going anywhere. "Do you know who I am? Do you know how many judges in this state owe their seats to my donations?" Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping just enough to make everyone in the courtroom lean in to hear. "I know exactly who you are, Mr. Merriweather, and I know my seat was earned, not purchased. Now sit down, or I'll have Officer Marshall escort you out." Officer Terrence Marshall, the bailiff standing near the door, straightened slightly. Harrison's eyes flicked to him, then back to Caprio. For 5 seconds, the room held its breath. Then Harrison sat, his movements sharp with barely contained fury. Timestamp: 9:47 a.m. Non-party Harrison Merriweather demands judicial recusal. Request denied. Spectator warned of removal. Mr. Donovan, the clerk, cleared his throat and stood, his voice professional and detached as he read from the docket. Case 2025-TR0891. City of Providence versus Colton Merriweather. Charges: driving under the influence, reckless driving. Winston Caldwell rose smoothly, his voice carrying the practiced ease of a man who'd made a career out of making problems disappear. "Your Honor, we're prepared to enter a plea of no contest and pay all fines immediately." This was a minor lapse in judgment. Judge Caprio didn't look up from the file. A back of 0.11 is not minor, counselor. Neither is reckless driving. From his seat, Harrison's voice cut through the courtroom again. "It's a traffic case. Let's not pretend this requires a full hearing." Caprio's eyes snapped to Harrison, and this time there was no patience in his expression. "Mr. Merriweather, I warned you. One more interruption and Officer Marshall will escort you out." However, Colton Merriweather hadn't said a word since entering the courtroom. "Clerk, log, defendant's BAC at time of arrest, 0.11. Vehicle traveling 67 miles per hour in 35 miles per hour zone. Officer noted defendant was cooperative but visibly intoxicated. No injuries reported. Arrest occurred the 3rd of January 2025, 11:42 p.m. Judge Caprio turned his attention to Colton, who stood beside his attorney looking like he might shatter at any moment. His hands were shaking. He couldn't make eye contact with anyone except the man in the gallery, and even that seemed to cost him. "Mr. Merriweather the younger, do you understand the charges against you?" Colton opened his mouth. Before a sound could come out, Harrison stood again. "My son understands. We've discussed it thoroughly. I asked your son, not you." The sharpness in Caprio's voice made Harrison pause. Winston Caldwell put a hand on the table, as if steadying himself against the tension building in the room. Rebecca Sloan, the junior partner seated beside him, scribbled notes but kept her head down. And the man in the gallery, the one Colton couldn't stop looking at, had just leaned forward in his seat. Judge Caprio studied Colton carefully. The young man was 21, well-dressed, clearly educated, but everything about his body language screamed distress. The shaking hands weren't from nerves, they were from guilt. "Mr. Merriweather, are you all right?" Colton's voice was barely audible. "I need to say something." Harrison's response was immediate, his voice dropping to a hiss that somehow carried across the silent courtroom. "Colton, we discussed this. I know, but I can't. Not here. Not now." Text message screenshot Harrison Merriweather to Colton Merriweather, 7:14 a.m. The 15th of January 2025. Keep your mouth shut. I didn't spend $3 million making this go away for you to ruin everything now. Whatever was happening between father and son, it wasn't about a DUI. This was about something else, something older, something buried. Judge Caprio addressed Winston Caldwell directly, his tone leaving no room for deflection. "Mr. Caldwell, is there something about this case I should know?" Caldwell looked at Harrison, then at Colton, then back at Caprio. His voice was careful, the voice of a man walking a tightrope. "Your Honor, I believe my client may wish to make a statement." Harrison stood so fast his chair scraped against the floor. "He does not wish to make a statement. I'm his father. I speak for him. Not in my courtroom, you don't. Like this video, if you believe money shouldn't buy justice." But Colton's eyes kept drifting to the man in the gallery, and that man was watching back. Judge Caprio followed Colton's gaze. Something about the exchange between the young man at the defense table and the stranger in the back row felt significant. He leaned forward slightly. "Son, do you know someone in the gallery?" Colton swallowed hard, his throat working like he was trying to force words past a blockade. Harrison's voice was steel. "He doesn't know anyone. Let's proceed. Mr. Merriweather, I am holding you in contempt if you speak again without being addressed. $1,000. Would you like to make it 2? The threat landed. Harrison's jaw tightened, his hands gripping the back of the bench in front of him, but he stayed silent. Judge Caprio turned back to Colton. "Who are you looking at?" Colton's voice cracked. "His name is Marcus. Marcus Jennings." The name hung in the air like smoke. Judge Caprio's eyes moved to the man in the worn jacket. "Officer Marshall, is there a Marcus Jennings in the gallery?" The man stood slowly. He was 34, lean, with the kind of weariness that came from carrying weight no one should have to carry. His voice was quiet but steady. "That's me, Your Honor." "Do you have business before this court today, Mr. Jennings?" "No, sir. I saw this case on the docket, the Merriweather name. I wanted to see for myself. Prison record excerpt Marcus Jennings. Convicted June 2022. Felony hit and run, vehicular assault. Sentenced to 4 years, Rhode Island Adult Correctional Institutions. Released September 2024 after serving 2.5 years. Currently on parole. Restrictions. Weekly reporting. No contact with victim Maria Santos. Employment verification required monthly." Judge Caprio's expression shifted slightly. Something in the air had changed. "You were convicted of a hit and run?" "Yes, sir. June 2022, at the Eastbrook Country Club." Colton made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. His entire body seemed to fold inward. Harrison's face had gone rigid, the color draining from his cheeks. Whatever connection existed between his son and this ex-convict, he was desperate to keep it hidden. But secrets don't stay buried forever. Not in a courtroom. Judge Caprio set his pen down and gave Marcus his full attention. "Mr. Jennings, tell me about your case." Marcus took a breath, his hands steady now. He'd waited 3 years for someone to ask. "I was a valet at Eastbrook Country Club. The 14th of June 2022. A woman was hit in the parking lot, Maria Santos. She worked there too, housekeeper. She was walking to her car after her shift. The police said it was my car. Witnesses said they saw my car. I wasn't even driving that night. I was parking cars on the other side of the lot, helping members leave after some event, but they had witnesses. They had evidence. My public defender told me to take a plea. I didn't do it, but I took the plea because they said I'd get 10 years if I went to trial. Original case file excerpt. Marcus Jennings, convicted June 2022. Evidence. 2 witness statements identifying defendant's vehicle, silver Honda Civic. Circumstantial evidence including proximity to scene. No physical evidence linking defendant to vehicle impact. No security footage available. Club reported security cameras malfunctioning that night. Conviction based on witness testimony and defendant's presence at scene. Judge Caprio's eyes narrowed. The security cameras were malfunctioning? That's what they said. Convenient, right? Harrison shifted in his seat, his fingers drumming against the bench. He was calculating, trying to figure out how to stop this train before it went off the rails. But he was out of leverage. Your Honor, this has nothing to do with today's case. I'll decide what's relevant. Mr. Jennings, please continue. Marcus's voice was steady, but underneath it was a river of pain. I lost everything, Your Honor. My wife divorced me while I was inside. I barely see my daughter now. Supervised visits twice a month if I'm lucky. I lost my job, my apartment, my credit. I did 2.5 years for something I didn't do. I always knew someone else hit that woman. I just couldn't prove it. He looked directly at Colton, and the weight of 3 years of stolen life was in his eyes. But I think the person who did it is standing right there. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Winston Caldwell closed his eyes briefly, as if bracing for impact. Rebecca Sloan stopped writing. Officer Marshall straightened. Subscribe if you believe the truth always finds a way out. And then Colton Merriweather did something no one expected. He stepped forward, away from his father, away from his attorneys, away from the safety of silence. His voice was raw. He's right. Harrison shot to his feet. Colton, don't you dare. I was driving. The words exploded out of him like a dam breaking. The courtroom went completely still. I was driving that night. I was drunk. I'd been at a party at the club. I hit her. I hit Maria. And I ran. What came next would destroy the father's leverage. Colton, you don't know what you're saying. You're confused. I'm not confused. I've known exactly what I did for 3 years. I see her face every time I close my eyes. I see his face. He pointed at Marcus, his hand shaking so hard it was almost a blur. I see him in my dreams, sitting in a prison cell because of me. I see his daughter crying because her dad's not there. I see all of it, every single day. Text message, screenshot Colton Merriweather to friend, dated the 2nd of January, 2025, 2:47 I can't do this anymore. I know what I did. I see his face every time I close my eyes. I'm going to tell the truth. I don't care what happens. I can't keep living like this. Colton's voice broke, but he kept going. My father made it go away. He paid people. He deleted the footage. He told me to keep quiet and it would all disappear, that no one would ever know. But it didn't disappear. Marcus went to prison. Maria can barely walk. And I've been drinking myself to sleep for 3 years because I can't live with what I did. He turned to Judge Caprio, tears streaming down his face. I don't want a different judge. I want to tell the truth. Please, let me tell the truth. 5 seconds. 7, 10, 12. In that silence, 3 years of lies collapsed under the weight of one son's conscience. But Harrison Merriweather was not finished fighting. He stood, his face red with fury, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. Your Honor, my son is clearly having a mental health episode. He doesn't know what he's saying. I'm requesting an immediate recess so we can get him medical attention. Sit down. Harrison pressed forward, desperation bleeding into his voice. You can't take the word of a disturbed young man as a confession. I said sit down. The courtroom had never heard Judge Caprio raise his voice like that. The sound reverberated off the walls, sharp and final. Harrison sat, but his hands were clenched into fists on the bench in front of him. Judge Caprio turned back to Colton, his voice softer now but no less serious. Son, I need you to understand what you're saying. If what you've told this court is true, you're confessing to multiple felonies. I know. You're confessing that an innocent man went to prison for something you did. I know. And you're implicating your father in conspiracy, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and potentially bribery. Colton looked at Harrison. For the first time all morning, he made direct eye contact with his father. The distance between them had never felt wider. I know. I'm sorry, Dad, but I can't be you. I won't be you. Payment document excerpt, Sentinel Security Consulting invoice to Merriweather Dynamics, dated the 16th of June, 2022. Amount, $200,000. Memo, technical services rendered. Note, Sentinel's only client that month was Merriweather Dynamics. Services unspecified. CEO signature, Harrison Merriweather. Harrison's voice was cold, every word clipped and hard. You're throwing away everything I built, everything I protected you from. You didn't protect me. You protected yourself. You protected the name. I've been in prison too, Dad, just without the bars. Subscribe if you think it takes more courage to tell the truth than to stay silent. But there was one more person who deserved to speak. Judge Caprio turned his attention to Marcus, who had remained standing in the back of the gallery. Mr. Jennings, you've heard what's been said. Is there anything you want to add? Marcus stood slowly, his hands trembling now. He'd waited 3 years for this moment, but now that it was here, he wasn't sure what to do with it. Your Honor, I've spent 2.5 years thinking about what I'd say if I ever met the person who did this to me. I practiced speeches, angry speeches. I wanted to hurt someone the way I was hurt. I wanted them to feel what I felt. But standing here now, looking at him, he looked at Colton, and something in his expression softened just slightly. I just feel tired. I missed my daughter's 6th birthday, her 7th. I missed her first day of 2nd grade. I missed teaching her to ride a bike. I missed reading her bedtime stories and tucking her in and telling her everything was going to be okay. Personal document excerpt. Marcus Jennings. Divorced, 2023 while incarcerated. Custody of daughter Keisha Jennings, age 8. Limited to supervised visits twice monthly per family court order. Current employment. Warehouse associate. Atlas Logistics. $17.50. Hour. Current residence. Efficiency apartment. Pawtucket. Marcus's voice grew stronger. His father took all of that from me. And for what? To protect a family name? To keep some kid out of trouble? I didn't even know who he was. I still don't. But he took my life. Not him. He pointed at Colton. Him. He pointed at Harrison. You took everything from me. But you just gave me something back. The truth. I've been saying I was innocent for 3 years and no one believed me. Not my wife. Not my lawyer. Not the judge. Not the jury. Now they will. He turned back to Colton. I don't forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I respect what you just did. It took guts. More guts than your father ever had. Colton was crying openly now, his shoulders shaking. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll do whatever it takes. Marcus's voice was quiet but firm. You can't give me back those years. You can't give me back my marriage or the time with my daughter. But you can make sure no one else loses theirs. Judge Caprio had heard enough. It was time to act. He addressed the entire courtroom, his voice carrying the weight of decades on the bench. What I've witnessed today is extraordinary. A young man has confessed to a felony in open court. He has implicated his father in a conspiracy to obstruct justice. And an innocent man has stood in this gallery and heard his name cleared for the first time in 3 years. This court does not have jurisdiction over the original case. That is a matter for the State Attorney General and the criminal courts. But I am taking the following actions immediately. He turned to the clerk. Mr. Donovan, contact the Rhode Island Attorney General's office. Inform them that a confession has been made in open court regarding Case 2022-CR4471, the wrongful conviction of Marcus Jennings. Request immediate review and intervention. This is urgent. Officer Marshall, Mr. Colton Merriweather is to surrender his passport before leaving this building. He is now a flight risk, pending criminal charges. He is not to leave the state of Rhode Island. Harrison started to stand. Judge Caprio's eyes locked onto him. Mr. Merriweather, you are not under arrest. Yet. But you should retain counsel for yourself, separate from your son. The Attorney General will want to speak with you about payments made to Sentinel Security Consulting, about donations made to the district attorney's campaign fund in June of 2022, and about witness statements that appear to have been purchased. Harrison's voice was barely above a whisper. "This is outrageous. My attorneys will. Your attorneys will be very busy. I suggest you let them work. Case referral, log. Referral to Rhode Island Attorney General, Criminal Division, perjury, obstruction of justice, conspiracy, witness tampering, bribery of public official. Subjects, Harrison Merriweather, Colton Merriweather. Related, wrongful conviction of Marcus Jennings. Case 2022CR4471. Victim, Maria Santos. Evidence, open court confession, financial records, witness testimony. Priority, urgent." Judge Caprio turned to Colton, and his voice softened just slightly. "Young man, what you did today took courage, real courage. It doesn't erase what you did 3 years ago, but it's the first step toward making it right. You will face consequences, serious consequences, but you'll face them with a clear conscience." "That's worth something." Colton nodded, unable to speak. Judge Caprio looked at Marcus. "Mr. Jennings, I am personally recommending that your conviction be vacated immediately and your record expunged. I am also recommending that you be connected with legal counsel for a civil suit against those responsible for your wrongful imprisonment. You deserved better from this system. I'm sorry it failed you." Marcus's voice broke for the first time. "Thank you, Your Honor. That's all I ever wanted. For someone to say they believed me. Comment justice if you think the innocent man deserved better." But the story didn't end with rulings. It ended with redemption. 4 months passed. The courtroom confession set off a chain reaction that moved faster than anyone expected. The Rhode Island Attorney General opened a full investigation within 48 hours. What they found was worse than anyone imagined. Colton Merriweather was formally charged with vehicular assault, leaving the scene of an accident, and obstruction of justice. He pled guilty to all charges. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison, the same amount of time Marcus had served. The judge who sentenced him noted that Colton's confession and cooperation were the only reasons he didn't receive more. Harrison Merriweather was charged with conspiracy, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and bribery of a public official. His trial was still pending, but the evidence was overwhelming. His assets were frozen. He resigned from the board of Merriweather Dynamics under pressure from shareholders who wanted nothing to do with the scandal. The company's stock dropped 30% in a week. News headline: Screenshot Providence Journal, the 12th of March 2025. Merriweather CEO, indicted. Paid nearly $3 million to frame innocent man for son's DUI hit and run. Marcus Jennings's conviction was vacated 60 days after the hearing. His record was fully expunged. He filed a civil suit against both Merriweathers, and it settled quickly. $12 million. Enough to rebuild a life. Enough to give his daughter the future she deserved. Custody document excerpt. Marcus Jennings. Full parental rights restored effective April 2025. Supervised visitation requirement removed. Joint custody arrangement with former spouse Anna Jennings modified to reflect father's cleared record and stable employment. The first day Marcus had full custody, he picked Keisha up from school himself. No supervisor. No time limit. Just a father and his daughter. She ran to him, her backpack bouncing. Her face lit up with a smile that made 3 years of hell worth surviving. "Daddy, are you staying this time?" He knelt down and pulled her into his arms. "I'm staying, baby. I'm never leaving again." Maria Santos, the woman Colton had hit, received $3 million from the Merriweather estate as part of the settlement. It was enough to afford full-time care, home modifications, and early retirement. She still walked with a cane, and she always would. But the money gave her dignity. It gave her peace. She told reporters outside the courthouse after the settlement was announced. Her voice steady despite the pain etched into her face. "I never wanted revenge. I just wanted them to admit what they did. Now I can heal." Colton Merriweather began his sentence at the minimum security facility in Cranston. He enrolled in the Victim Advocacy Program. He wrote Marcus a letter from prison, 12 pages, handwritten, every word soaked in guilt and apology and something that might have been hope. Marcus read it. He didn't respond, but he kept it, folded in a drawer beside the court documents that cleared his name. 6 months later, Marcus did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He visited Colton in prison. They sat across from each other in the visitation room. Two men whose lives had been destroyed and rebuilt by the same moment. They talked for 2 hours. Marcus's voice was quiet but clear. "I don't forgive you yet, but I'm working on it." Colton nodded, his eyes red. "That's more than I deserve. Maybe. But my daughter asked me why you did it. Why you told the truth. I told her because you couldn't live with yourself anymore. She said that means you're not all bad. She's 8. She still believes people can change. Maybe she's right. Share this with someone who needs to know that guilt has an expiration date, and it's today." Judge Frank Caprio received a letter 3 months after the hearing. It arrived in a pale blue envelope with careful handwriting and crayon drawings in the margins. It was from Keisha Jennings. "Dear Judge, thank you for giving me my daddy back. He says you listened when no one else did. He says you made them tell the truth. I drew you a picture of our house. Daddy says we can stay there forever now. Thank you for believing him. Love, Keisha." Judge Caprio framed it and hung it on the wall next to his law degree. Underneath it, he wrote a note in his own handwriting. "This is why we listen. This is why we never stop asking questions. This is why we never let power silence truth." Harrison Merriweather's trial took place 9 months after his son's confession. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. He appealed. The appeal was denied. Colton and Harrison never spoke again, but Colton and Marcus did. Not often, not easily, but they did. And slowly, painfully, something that might have been forgiveness began to grow in the spaces between their words. Maria Santos visited Marcus once, a year after the settlement. She wanted to thank him, not for what he'd done, but for what he'd survived. They sat on a bench outside the courthouse, where it had all come apart and been put back together, and they talked about second chances. She told him, her voice soft, "You could have been angry. You could have been bitter. But you chose to be kind." Marcus shook his head. "I'm still angry. I'm still bitter. But I'm also a father. And my daughter's watching how I handle this. I want her to see that you don't have to let pain turn you into someone you're not." Judge Caprio retired 2 years later. At his retirement ceremony, Marcus Jennings was there, sitting in the front row with Keisha beside him. When Caprio saw them, he stopped mid-speech and smiled. "That," he said, pointing to Marcus and Keisha, "is why I did this job. Not for the cases we win, but for the people we save." The courtroom erupted in applause. Colton Merriweather served his full sentence. He was released in 2028. He never went back to his father's company. Instead, he worked with a nonprofit that helped exonerees rebuild their lives. He gave every speech he could about the cost of silence. He told his story over and over, even when it hurt, because he believed that pain had purpose. And Marcus Jennings, the man who lost 3 years to a lie, got to walk his daughter down the aisle when she got married 20 years later. He got to hold his grandchildren. He got to live the life that had almost been stolen from him. On the day of Keisha's wedding, Marcus stood beside her in the church, waiting to walk her down the aisle. She squeezed his hand. "I'm glad you stayed, Daddy. Me too, baby. Me too." Money couldn't buy back lost years. But truth, even when it came late, could buy back a future. And in the end, that was enough. Dramatization for storytelling and education, not legal advice or reporting.